All right, guys. We're going to go on. We're going to hopefully get through two more modules today. Still not finishing the chapter because this chapter is just ridiculously long. But we will next time and probably go into the last chapter as well tomorrow, Friday. And then next week we'll just have one chapter to finish. We should get it done within the first half of the week, and then you guys will be set. You'll have all the information you need. I'm still hoping to post the what are they called? The the slides. But I'll be honest, if you just go back through these videos, even if you mute me and just kind of slide the little bar down there at the bottom through, you should be able to see most of what we went through, at least in the last month. I hope everybody's doing all right. Hope everybody's healthy. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll talk about other ways that we get rid of municipal solid waste. Lord God, I just thank you for everything that you've given us. Thank you, Lord, for the abundance that we have here in the United States. And Lord, as I think about the amount of waste that I produce, help us, Lord, to reduce that. We're the only animals that do that. And that has stuck with me for the last couple of days. The fact, Lord, that we are the only ones who produce waste. And I don't think that we're supposed to produce nearly as much as we do. And Lord, may you give us a way to better reduce, reuse, and recycle that waste. I ask that you be with us in that attempt. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Yes, I just prayed about an environmental issue. It's not a bad thing to do every once in a while, probably. So let's talk about the first thing that you can do with certain waste products rather than just throw them away. And that, well, we talked about reducing those, recycling those, and reusing those already. But composting is a method that really gets overlooked. If you have even a little bit of land to where you can kind of put this off away from your house a little bit, I'll be honest, this would be kind of odd in my backyard, but I don't think it would be a bad idea at all. This is when you take organic material and you basically stack it in a box like this. The reason that you always see these boxes with openings on the side, you always see them kind of graded, is so that air can seep into the different layers. You actually water this as well, almost like you would a plant, because there are living things inside of this pile. And what's happening is you are allowing those living organisms to break down that refuse, all of those reclaimed organic materials, into food for those organisms. At the very bottom of that, as this kind of churns through a few months, the very bottom of that, you will get really good topsoil. You will get very organic, rich matter that you can then put in soil as fertilizer. It's a really unique method. It's a way that we can recycle materials that would otherwise just go in landfills. Don't get me wrong. I'm a firm believer, and I tell this to my kids. My wife believes this, and I'm sure you guys do as well. I throw things out the window that are food related. Anything that I can ingest can be broken down in nature without much complication, or at least can serve as food for other organisms. So if you ever see me driving down the road, if you see me throw something out of my car, I promise you it is not a can or a garbage, something that's meant for the garbage, a wrapper, something that should be disposed of. It is some sort of food, some sort of scrap material that I know is going to be broken down by nature. And all that composting does is it speeds that process up. If I throw a banana peel out into the road, it will eventually break down. Instead of a couple months, it will probably take, well, I mean, something will probably eat it, to be honest with you, but it'll probably, if it was just left alone, it would probably take maybe, 6 months for just nature to take its course and break that down. In a compost pile, it's only going to take 1 to 2 months. All right, so that brings us to landfills. Basically, what we do with all the waste that is not gone from reduction, that is not reused, that is not recycled, or not put in a compost pile. After you exhaust those other things, the landfill is all that's left. The primary destination for most MSW, or municipal solid waste, is going to be the landfill. It's over 50% of all that we throw away, all that we discard, finds its way to this hole in the ground that we then just fill in with trash. It's a really weird system. I was just telling my son that the other day. He was asking like why he had to throw something away. We were at a park, Actually, we were at the Edwardsville watershed. If you guys have never been there, go take a walk around the lake there. I guess if you can call it a lake, the low area of the watershed. It's almost more like a swamp. Um, Really, it's a really cool place. It's a really easy hike if you're looking for just a little walk one day. Get out of the house, go do that. Go, take some friends. It would definitely be a good move. But rightfully, we ate a little snack after we did our walk because kids are just like that. And he had a wrapper that, and part of it, a little piece of it, fell down on the ground. And we told him he had to pick it up and go throw it away. And he kind of questioned that. He was like, "Why do I have to do that?" And I was like, "Well, we don't want to put trash in this ecosystem. We don't want to." I know you guys are sitting there going, "Oh man, Mr. Eddie probably talks about science a lot with his kids," and you're absolutely right. I do. All right, so we explained why it was important to not put trash in this beautiful ecosystem that they've created here at the watershed. And as he was throwing it away, and I go, "It's much better for us to take it and put it in a big hole in the ground and then cover it up with dirt." There is a hypocrisy here to everything that we're talking about. But landfills are the cheapest and most effective way that we know of to get rid of unusable material. Now, just because it's the best way doesn't mean that it's a good way, and landfills are not a good way to do this. In fact, I'm going to argue that there's a different way that we can talk about here in just a second. So, one of the reasons that we don't like landfills is because of leachate. I believe I'm saying that correctly. I could be wrong. Correct me if I am. Leachate, which is a liquid that contains elevated levels of pollutants as a result of having passed through municipal solid waste or contaminated soil, which, trust me, all landfills have contaminated soil. Because this is the interesting thing. Down there at the bottom right-hand corner, and I promise we'll get off this slide soon, we have a newspaper that I believe was from the 70s. I'm not sure. But this was from a landfill that was recently unearthed. So Arizona State University, or one of the universities in Arizona, did a sort of experiment where they did an archaeological dig of a landfill that had been sealed for 20, 30, 40 years, something along those lines. And they wanted to see if our initial belief of decomposition of that material was true. If they were going to open up this landfill and they were just going to find some scraps, some metals and things like that, but everything else was going to be decomposed. And that was not the case. They found newspapers like the one down here on the right that were perfectly readable, even though it had been years, decades, since this landfill had been closed. Okay, it shows that because we seal these as well as we can, not enough water and moisture gets in to allow for microbes to actually do what they need to do to break down this material. And also, a lot of what's in a landfill is not going to be broken down by microbes. Okay, you're not going to get a plastic bottle is going to be in that landfill for maybe hundreds of years. Okay, we thought that the newspaper would be gone. Okay, that seems like a common, that would get destroyed. If you left that out in the rain, it wouldn't take but a couple rains for that newspaper to be destroyed. But in a landfill, it's actually fairly well preserved, which is not what we want. Oh, hang on. So we decided that, hey, we had to do better than this, and what we have now is sanitary landfills. These are quote-unquote modern landfills. I definitely wouldn't call them sanitary, but they are more modern. A lot more engineering and thought have went into these newly designed landfills. So these are holes in the ground, just like a normal landfill, that are engineered to reduce the amount of contamination to the surrounding environment as much as possible. So, and what they do, they basically just make a clay tomb. There's not a lot to this. What they're just trying to do is they're trying to capture that leachate. And they do that by lining the bottom of the landfill with pipes before anything is thrown in. These pipes are just they're just really perforated pipes that capture the leachate and that gets pumped back up to the top, where it sort of goes in sort of a pumping action. It just sort of recycles back down. It's poured back into the landfill. Sometimes, if they find out, they test this material, and if they find out the leachate is too contaminated to be put back into the landfill, they have to extract it and treat it as nuclear waste, or not nuclear waste, but as hazardous waste. So, which has a whole new set of guidelines. These landfills, even though they're not super complex, they are much better at maintaining that leachate, not allowing it to spread into other soils and other waterways. They're also a lot more expensive to construct and operate. So municipalities have to pay for the right to use any landfill, and these are called tipping fees. And anecdotally, they're called that because that's how much it costs to tip the debris, the garbage, into the landfill from the garbage truck. I don't know how true that statement is, that sentiment, but these are expensive to operate, and of course there has to be a fee associated with it. I pay for my garbage to be taken away every single month. I pay a bill for that, and you will too at some point. So, sitting a landfill, which is the process of designating its location, finding an area for it, is a really big undertaking. You have to, first off, have the correct soil. You have to be the correct distance away from waterways. And I love this. You have to be far enough away for it not to be unpleasant, but you also have to be close enough for it to be economical. And what I mean by that is that you have to be far enough away from a populated area so that people don't want a landfill in their backyard. And I can completely understand this. Okay, as a homeowner, and one day you guys will be homeowners, but you don't even have to be a homeowner. You just don't want, I don't think anybody here wants to live right behind a dump. Okay, you don't want that leachate to be so close to you that you're thinking about it when you're grabbing a glass of water from the tap. Okay, it's just common sense. At the same time, it has to be close enough so that you're not trucking garbage, 35, 40 miles. Some people are, but I mean, let's say 50 miles. You're not trucking garbage 50 miles just to put it in a dump. I mean, that is not economical at all. Do you think those garbage trucks get good gas mileage? No, of course not. So these companies, they have to turn a profit. And I don't think they're evil for doing that. Any company has to, make money so that they can pay their employees a comparable wage. So, there's a delicate balance here. It needs to be away from people, but it needs to be close to people. It needs to be far away from water sources, and usually people live by water sources. So, I mean, it's really challenging to do this and to do it right. That's where incineration, I think, should be popping up everywhere. And we don't see enough of it, and that's because we are on this kick where global warming is such a big deal, rightfully so, and we need to reduce our pollution output. We need to reduce our global footprint, and especially we need to reduce our emissions. So because of all those things, incineration kind of gets a bad rap, but I think it is a much better option. I really do. I think it is a much better option than a traditional landfill. Landfills do nothing. They are just, like I said, they're tombs for trash. Incineration, on the other hand, actually serves a purpose. You take that trash, at least 75% of it. I mean, think about that. 75% of the 50% that we put in the landfill. So that would mean that only 25%, no, I'm sorry. Quick math. I need my calculator here. Let's figure out exactly what it is. So it would be 0.75 times 50. Minus 50. There we go. So only 12%. If we did this, if we went to a wide-scale incineration program, we would reduce our waste that actually went to a landfill down to 12.5% of all waste. Okay, right now, over 50% goes to a landfill. The rest is reduced, reused, or recycled. And some of that probably is incinerated. I'm sure that there's some of these in the United States in certain places. But if we went to everything, if every municipality went to this, we'd only put 12.5%. I bet you we could get that even lower, down to under 10% that would go to a landfill. So that's because 75% of MSW is combustible, which means we can burn it. It can reduce volume by 90%. It does produce ash, the residual inorganic material that doesn't combust during incineration. We'd have to deal with that ash. That would have to go into the landfills. But we can actually take that ash and we can use it to make things like cement blocks and concrete. I don't know if you guys have ever opened up a bag of concrete before it's mixed. It's got ash in it already. It's got lots of stuff. Okay, it's definitely a very dry, chalky sort of substance like ash. So it would work perfectly. So here we could take this material, 75% of what we put in a landfill, we could reduce it down to simply ash, and then we could use that ash to build buildings. It's a beautiful, beautiful idea, in my opinion. It's a beautiful way to solve a big problem. And by the way, I glossed over the fact that you could use that heat and that fire that you're creating when you incinerate this trash to produce electricity, which of course we're always looking for greener ways to make our electricity rather than just burning coal or fossil fuel. So why don't we do this? Well, actually, before, you know what? Let's go right to it. The bad. Why do we not do this, in my opinion, wonderful thing? Well, there's really one reason more than anything. But one, it produces harmful greenhouse gases. Okay, it absolutely does. And I kind of said that in the first one too. It pollutes. It's not, now you can put scrubbers on it, okay, just like they do at refineries, and you can try to reduce the amount of pollution that is put in the atmosphere. You can try to capture a lot of that, but don't get me wrong, you're still going to pollute. There's no kind of way around it. But listen, we're polluting to generate electricity anyway. So this solves two problems. It generates electricity, okay, and it still pollutes, but it's not polluting significantly more. It's, in fact, you could argue it's polluting significantly less than coal or petroleum, which we use all the time. So it's a greener way to produce electricity, though it still is a pollution causing way. It's a pollutant invoking way. But it also solves another problem at the same time. It gets rid of all of this trash, which is a huge methane producer. So I still think that it's better. But then you're sitting there and you're going, and some people say it might impact recycling. That's ridiculous. I'm still going to recycle. Even if we switched over to this, I would still recycle. There's no reason not to. So you're sitting there going, okay, well then why don't we do this? And it's because of that middle reason right there in the beginning. It's really expensive, and it results usually in higher tipping fees. So that expense goes to the consumer, okay? It goes to the residents. And to be honest, I kind of get that to a certain degree. I don't know how much I pay. I think it's like $30 a month to have my trash taken away. The reason I don't know is because it's tied into my water bill. So it doesn't really differentiate. It doesn't say this is for trash, this is for water. So I don't know exactly what it is, but I think it's like $30 a month. I don't want to pay $100 a month. Okay, I'll be honest. I just don't. I don't want to do that. However, if we could generate electricity from it, and it would be a much greener way to do this, and we would reduce landfills down to only 10% of our waste, it definitely might be worth it. So let's watch this quick video on incineration, and then we'll be done for the day, which is a pretty short day, so it's not too bad. Maybe we'll watch it.
My solution to most of my problems is to light them on fire. So why can't garbage be one of those problems? Hi, I'm Julian. This is D-News. Americans make a lot of trash. According to the EPA, in 2012, the average person made 1,600 pounds of solid waste that year. That's about 45% more than the average European. About 55% of that goes in a landfill. So to translate that, if you're an average American, you are responsible for burying 880 pounds of trash in 2012. Is there something that garbage could be doing besides just sitting there? Sweden thinks so. About 1% of Swedish trash ends up in a landfill. The rest is almost evenly split between being recycled and burned for energy. Sweden actually burns so much trash, they import 700,000 tons of it from Europe in order to keep the fires lit. And by using the heat to create steam and run turbines, they get about 8.5% of their electricity needs from burning waste. Goran Skoglund, a representative of one of Sweden's energy companies, estimates that burned trash has about a third the energy pound for pound as burned fossil fuels. Burning that trash means they save space in landfills, don't need to import fossil fuels, and as an added bonus, they cut down on greenhouse gases. All right, stop right there because I know exactly what you all just yelled at your computer screens. Julian, burning anything is going to create CO2. And yeah, you're right. But like a Swedish police drama, it's all very nuanced. On the face of it, burning garbage actually looks less favorable than coal or natural gas in terms of CO2 production. According to the EPA, flaming trash creates 2,988 pounds of CO2 per megawatt hour. For the same power, coal makes 2,249 pounds of CO2, and natural gas makes 1,135 pounds. That doesn't sound good until you consider that a lot of the CO2 released by burning trash is from stuff that was part of the Earth's carbon cycle. It's carbon that was in the air not too long ago and would be returning there again, whereas the carbon released from burning fossil fuels was out of the carbon cycle for millions of years, sequestered away deep underground. So the EPA considers the CO2 impact of burning waste to be about a third as bad as it looks. But energy from garbage unequivocally cuts down on a much more insidious greenhouse gas, methane. Methane doesn't stay in the atmosphere for hundreds of years like CO2 can. Usually it's out in about a dozen. But this little molecule is so good at trapping heat, the EPA estimates one CH4 has 25 times the impact as one CO2 over the course of a century. And do you know what the third biggest source of man-made methane is in the United States? Landfills. Yep, 18% of the methane Americans make happens when we bury our trash and let microbes just go to town on it. Methane is a key component of natural gas, so some landfills capture it and sell it to power companies. You'd think the trade-off would be reduced methane for increased CO2, but the number one source of methane emissions is natural gas and petroleum systems. So you don't get that methane when you burn junk, and as a bonus, you don't have to burn as much natural gas or coal. Double win. Flaming heaps of trash isn't as totally glamorous as I'm making it sound, though. Like anything, it has its own foibles. It cuts down on greenhouse gases, but the trade-off is it puts other pollutants into the air. Sulfur dioxide, which causes acid rain, is released, along with trace amounts of mercury compounds and dioxins, which are highly toxic and build up in fatty tissues. Concerns over these chemicals are the main hindrance to adoption in the US, along with nobody wanting a trash burning facility in their backyard when there's lots of cheap land. Sweden strictly regulates all these toxic byproducts, and even so, plant representatives say their scrubbers reduce toxic chemical levels to half the legal limits. Some of these byproducts would still be present in landfills too, only they'd have the potential to seep into groundwater if the landfills aren't equipped with a protective lining. Environmentalists who oppose burning trash argue that the goal should be to reduce how much waste we make in the first place and recycle more. And they're absolutely right. But there's no evidence that burning waste will hurt recycling efforts. Sweden is expecting to step up recycling from 50 to 60% in the coming years, and they're only burning what they can't use. Even though the US buries most of our trash, we only recycle 34% of it. So, even though it's not glamorous and not the cure-all for our refuse and energy woes, it looks like burning trash could actually be an important stopgap for climate change if it were more widespread. Egypt deals with its junk in a rather unusual and interesting way. Lizette and the team at our sister channel, Seeker, cover that right here.
Individuals pushing carts pick up most of the garbage, and this system works surprisingly well. Almost 90% of materials thrown away in Cairo are recycled.
Where do you fall on the burning trash issue? For it, hate it, have some reservations about it after Toy Story 3? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe.
I certainly do. I don't know if you've seen that episode or that movie, but that part almost made me cry. All right, so I don't know. I'm curious. What do you guys think? Put a comment down below, or you guys can maybe even start a thread on Google Classroom. That's all I have for you guys today. We will continue on talk about hazardous waste, and then hopefully finish this chapter up next time, which is tomorrow. But until then, you guys have a good one.